Representative Torres.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see America's critical mineral dependency on China as our single greatest strategic vulnerability. In 2010 and 2011, China engaged in economic coercion against Japan, imposing export controls on rare earth elements, the first known instance of Beijing weaponizing its chokehold on critical minerals and rare earths against a foreign country. Since 2010, we have known that Western countries like the United States are dangerously dependent on China for critical minerals and rare earths. We have known that China is able and willing to weaponize its chokehold on critical minerals against adversaries like the United States. Despite knowing these dangers, the U.S. is no closer to achieving critical mineral independence than we were 15 years ago. In fact, China controls more of the world's rare earth refining today than it did back in 2010 and 2011 during its economic coercion of Japan. I guess my question is, why has the United States been so dangerously complacent when it comes to breaking out of critical mineral dependency? America made itself energy independent from the Middle East, yet we seem to lack the same sense of urgency around making ourselves mineral independent from China. Why the discrepancy?
Is that for either one of us?
Yeah, either one of us.
Do you want to go first, Mr. President?
No, I'll follow you.
Okay. Congressman, if I could take one step back. Yeah. We repeated for basically a decade that China was an economic competitor or a strategic competitor. And when President Xi comes to power, he makes a decision that China is a strategic adversary, not a competitor. It's a very different psychological outlook. Second, to your point, and why I advocate this in conjunction with an Article 5-like instrument tool, is to take an assessment of your vulnerabilities. If I could, as you went through basically 2 years of war in the Middle East, including with Iran, as you noticed, energy prices did not spike, and I know we all know this, it's been written, so I'm not violating any prior assignments. There were models where, God forbid, there was conflagration in the Middle East, you were gonna see energy go to 140 bucks a barrel. That didn't happen. And why? Because of the United States. Full stop. And we worked at it over decades, did not abandon the effort of resilience as related. So you need exactly that type of resilience and study where your vulnerabilities are, what you need to shore up those vulnerabilities, not both yourself independently, but with allies and friends alike. So both reshoring and friendshoring in Complacent. Magnets would be an area. Now, I know you would find it hard to believe, but as a middle child, I don't mean to destroy the comity of the group right now. But I say this because, as I noted earlier, Europe's plank post-Lithuania. The only time they've thought of employing that unity was now with the United States because of how we're negotiating with the EU. They haven't deployed it, but they threatened to. So it was designed with China in mind, but it's actually looked at and made to be deployed with us. One of the problems for China right now is, given the war in Ukraine by Russia, they have lost access to the European market. Leveraging, as the Congressman noted, our own market, that is a powerful force against China, plus our allies in the Indo-Pacific, Japan, Korea, Australia, New Zealand, India, Philippines, and other countries. So understanding how we organize as a group and put together that economic coalition with real tools to confront both their coercion and Wolf Warrior tactics in service of a larger interest is key to our long-term economic independence, our economic resilience, and our competition with China.
I want to squeeze in one more question. There are reports that China has agreed to resume exports of rare earths to the United States in exchange for the United States resuming exports of H20 AI GPUs to China. And there are competing views, right? The argument from the administration is that it wants to make the world, including China, dependent on an American AI tech stack that includes NVIDIA chips. But then the opponents argue that the H20s are just too computationally powerful. How should we view the deal? Should we see it as building an American AI tech stack, or as American capitulation to China's economic coercion?
Well, I think this goes to knowing where your red lines are. And in the point I made in response to an earlier question, and these are either sensitive technologies which are aiding a strategic rival, or they're not. And that plays into the US's security interests, or it doesn't. But somewhere, that call needs to be made. And greater minds than mine will have to apply themselves to that in making that decision and evaluating that deal. And some will argue that that the Chinese tech will catch up and they'll have their own versions of it and they won't need it. And look, in my experience, everyone can make whatever argument they want around these issues, but it all comes back to that fundamental question: what is the security interest, and what is the red line that you can and cannot cross?
Mr. Congressman, what I would say is, like in any review, you want to find where China's vulnerabilities are and make sure they're dependent on the United States or the free world in those areas. They have a tremendous amount of vulnerability to three sources: food dependence, energy dependence, and fear of their own people. And where those vulnerabilities are, we want to go at them and make them actually, rather than totally disengage, make them more vulnerable by making them more dependent.
Could I also touch then and follow up to your earlier question, which is, why has it been going on for so long? Because end users want cheaper prices, and China will give them the cheaper prices. And until there is a resolve to break that hold, which is a vulnerability at this end of the chain and in other end user parts of the chain, be that in Japan or elsewhere. You made the point about what occurred with Japan and rare earths earlier. That is true, and the answer to that was an Australian company called Lynas set up a rare earths processing facility in Malaysia with support from the Japanese government through JOGMEC, and that enabled such a process to provide a secure supply chain to Japan. Now, I applaud the Japanese government for the initiative they took, but took strong leadership. It put clear guardrails in place, and Lynas is now building a plant in Texas, and which will do heavy rare earth processing. Now, the rare earths business is a pretty marginal business, and it doesn't take much to rattle it when you have price manipulations. And so the measure that's been taken with MP, I think is an excellent one, but it's one that should really be extended to allies and partners, whether they be in the United States or friendshore elsewhere.